thank you for checking out Life, Loss and Legacy, a planning solo podcast dedicated to helping people navigating those first few years after losing their partner. My name's Jordan Vaka and I'm an independent financial advisor with Planning Solo. And in this episode, I'd like to go through what we're doing with this podcast in a little bit more detail and dip into just why we've started putting it all together. Before I hop into that, though, I encourage you to get in touch with any questions, thoughts, or comments. The contact details are in the show notes, and also you can reach us on the website planningsolo.com.au. Now, I want this series to be as useful, practical, and valuable as possible, so any feedback or guidance you can provide will be very gratefully accepted. Now, onto the first, I think, natural question to ask about anybody doing something quite like this. Why? Why are we doing this? Why put together a series of 30-odd podcast episodes dedicated to one of the most difficult and challenging periods of a person's life? Well, first, a little bit of background on Planning Solo and me and how we got here might be useful. It might put us into a bit more context. I've been a financial advisor now for nearly 17 years, and a big part of that was me being kind of your traditional, typical, generic financial advisor. I was helping everybody with everything financial. Income protection to superannuation to investments to shares to bank statements to the whole gamut. Now, it was a great experience and it taught me a great deal of things, but ultimately I came to realize it wasn't for me, which led me to try over some time to work out what actually was for me. Because it was very obvious to me as I worked through that what was for me was the group of people that I got to work with. It was all about the people that I got to work with, because I'd realized that I had a group of people that I really valued our time together. People who were looking for somebody to trust or for somebody to guide them, and for somebody who could provide really clear, supportive advice, free of any strings, just really straightforward, really clear advice. And I realized as I worked through this kind of moment of epiphany that this group of people also wasn't very experienced with their money, to the point that the idea of managing their own money would cause them quite a lot of discomfort and not infrequently serious anxiety and fears. So I came to think about it and work through that idea that working with this group of people brought a lot of meaning to my career and let me really bring, I think, my best version of work to bear helping them. Now, it should be recognized that this process really continued as I tried to focus in on which group of people I liked working with. Really try to identify exactly the cohort of people I like working with. Having realized that it was all about the people I work with, how do we find the ones that are the best fit? So I drilled down and I really narrowed down the focus, and I worked through the idea that what I really liked working with were people who were financially inexperienced, nervous around money, nervous around the future, but looking for things to be better. But they were just really unsure of who to listen to. They were dealing with advisors perhaps that inherited, advisors they didn't really gel with. Billy Bob, the brother-in-law, had opinions and thoughts and quite strident ideas about what to do. This population of people were generally women. They fit into that group quite easily with that level of inexperience. Not all women, but the women that we work with, they're aged between 45 and 65. They haven't managed the family finances in the past, and now they're finding themselves responsible for a financial picture that's a lot more complicated than what they've been used to. They want to take back control, though, because that financial future is ahead of them. They can see it, and they're a bit nervous about it, but they know that if they can take back control of that, they will take back control of their life. The thing is, they're just not too sure where to start. Finally, this group of people tends to be, and the business has developed to the point where this is all we really focus on. They're people going through one of life's big transitions. Now, when we're talking about transitions, I'm talking about really big life events like divorce, retirement, bereavement. I started off working purely in the divorce space, which is a difficult transition, regardless of how amicable the process is. Very quickly, though, I had people getting in touch with me that weren't getting divorced, but were going through something else, and very often that was bereavement. They liked what we were talking about. They gelled or resonated with what I was saying, and they would ask questions and tell me things that made it very clear that there was really a lot of overlap in the work and the skills that we use in our divorce work with all these other transitions, particularly around bereavement. They were contacting my team and they were saying things like, I've got these shares, but the broker who was helping my husband keeps talking at me, keeps treating me like I'm a bit of an idiot. What should I do with this self-managed super fund was another question we'd hear a bit of. My partner's accountant keeps asking me, but I just don't know where to start. They won't give me any advice around it. They expect me to make all the decisions, but I just don't know what it all means. And finally, the big question, and the one that is relevant for divorce, retirement, bereavement, any of these big transitions. I'm really, really worried I'm going to run out of money. How can I be confident I'll have enough? So that's why we've spent the last few years developing this very, very specific practice around helping people finding their feet again after losing their partner in life. And really the two arms of the practice are helping people through divorce, but really our big focus at the moment, or into the future, is helping people through that bereavement phase. So all of that circles back to that original question of why are we doing this? Why are we doing this podcast? And frankly, it's just because I think it's really needed. So they say there's no instruction booklet for life, and there definitely isn't one for death either. So the people I help every day, they just don't know where to start. So they're forced to trust their advisor, lawyers, accountants, financial advisors, whatever advisor that they've inherited. And often those advisors were taking instructions or giving advice to their partner who's now gone. And that relationship they had with that partner, the advisor had with that partner, might have been built upon complexity, a different type of understanding, a different type of sophistication. And so that's the way that advisor's been speaking and communicating and used to working. And now they've got somebody on the scene who doesn't have that level of experience with the family finances, that might be asking questions that the advisor isn't really comfortable answering. So they've inherited these advisors, but then they're forced to trust them. And then what happens when they don't build that trust? When the advisors don't fit the mold for any number of reasons, what I've seen tend to happen is that the clients tend to blame themselves. They blame themselves for, I'm not getting it, or I don't understand it, I really should get this, I should. To which I always think, well, of course you don't understand it. This hasn't been your day-to-day life. This is new to you. Anything that's new to you is going to be hard to understand. You've never done this before. I actually think that in that case, it's on us as advisors to make it understandable. Financial advisors is actually part of our code of conduct. We have to have the ability and the capacity to make sure that our advice is understandable so that people can make informed decisions. If we're not doing that, then arguably we're not really fulfilling our duties. So instead of that, instead of a level of understanding and tailoring communication and being conscious of who you're talking to, people instead get bombarded. They get bombarded with terms, jargon, processes, and kind of just things in a way that makes them feel like they should know all of this. They should be familiar with all these elements. But really, why should you? David Patkin, one of the guests we have on an upcoming episode, he talks about the fact that for most people, they will only ever be an executor to an estate once, maybe twice in their lifetime, and it won't apply for everybody. So how familiar should you really be with the ins and outs of running an estate, let alone administering the financial instruments and entities and aspects that your late partner managed? Every relationship divides the work involved in life. And when your agreed division was that wasn't going to be your area, why should you all of a sudden be expected to know everything about it all the way? Why should you understand, immediately testamentary trusts, the roles, responsibilities, and risks of being an executor, the many steps involved in administering an estate? I mean, also even what on earth an estate actually is. Why should you necessarily be across all the details around superannuation, shares, bonds, managed funds, cash accounts, term deposits, companies, tax personally, tax in super, tax in a company, tax in trusts, trust themselves? Why should you be familiar with all these different things if that wasn't what you were doing? I'm ranting about this because it is really important to me that people stop being so hard on themselves about the things they don't yet understand. So a big part of my role is helping people come to grips with all these terms and points so that they can be an informed and active participant in the process. And a lot of that boils down to education, respectful discussion, and developing and honoring the trust that we get from our clients. Because I believe that by doing so, by gradually taking on that mantle of managing the family finances, of managing the budget, managing the super, managing all these bits and pieces, you're also starting the process of rebuilding your own new and initially, I'm sure, unwelcome future. That process of making decision after decision after decision, I see as a very sedimentary process in that you are building, each decision is another layer, and another layer as you build this platform of knowledge and confidence and expertise. Now, that is sometimes a gradual process, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think sometimes the professions involved in this can make people feel a bit silly about taking the time they need to build that sedimentary layer by layer by layer that they can feel confident standing up, getting out of the hole that they're in and taking over. So I got to thinking, we have these conversations with people. We do so much around education. We do so much around, making sure people are comfortable as they work through the process. I got to thinking, which apparently is a thought that every man has now. They used to say that every man had a novel in him, though that was where it should have stayed, some people say. It seems like now everybody's got a podcast. So anyway, I got to thinking that maybe instead of helping people on a one-to-one basis, I can build something that anybody can listen to and that just might help make that path a little less rocky and a little less steep. The idea I had in my mind was that somebody's perhaps leaving the office of an advisor they've inherited. They hop in the car and they're thinking, what on earth were they talking about? What does this mean? What does that mean? And also people, and that person might also not be asking a really fundamental question. Why didn't I feel comfortable asking them to explain themselves? Which is a really big point. And so I want them to be able to pop something on in the car on the drive home and just try to educate themselves around some of these little nooks and crannies and the nitty-gritty elements of managing an estate, or being an executor, or rebuilding afterwards, or the psychological aspects of grief, or managing money and parenting, and all of these things. And I can say, thankfully, my ego isn't quite as precious that I need to think that I'm the only voice on the whole series. So what I've been able to do is invite a really broad range of guests to come on and help build, I hope, a really helpful and informative series to help people like you going through things that you're going through with questions that you might have, helping those people, helping you to step forward with a little bit more clarity, a little more certainty, and my hope, a lot more confidence. So that's the why. That's the why we're doing this. Now let's talk about, fairly quickly, the what that's involved. By which I mean, what's my actual objective here? What's the main thing I'm hoping this series will do for you? And look, I will be completely frank, there is a commercial element to this. My business is built around helping people in this space. If this message and this process and this product resonates with people, hopefully they get in touch and we get to work together. But even so, the real fundamental reason that I'm building this thing, what I want people to take out of this is one pretty simple thing. I just hope that it helps you make better decisions more often. Not perfect decisions every time, because that's not possible. But I hope that it helps people make better decisions more often and at a pace that maybe makes them feel a little bit more in control. And also that if the decisions go wrong, which does happen, they can recover from them quickly. So because if you're going through this process, you may well have noticed this is a period of your life where you're going to be asked to make a lot of decisions. A lot. From funeral arrangements to flowers, to legacy, to advisors, to real estate, to shares, to superannuation, to kids, to housing, to your future, to the broader family, to everything else in between, around, above and below. You will be asked to make millions, thousands, hundreds, dozens, however many decisions. That is so much more than what you're used to making. And you will find yourself with people looking at you for decisions. Now, that expectation or that requirement can be really confronting, really exhausting, and frequently, from what I've seen, quite paralyzing. It's not unusual for people to freeze and put everything on pause for days, weeks, sometimes even months, while they work through what needs to be done. You may already have found yourself, or you may find yourself in the near future, in rooms where people are talking at you, throwing around jargon and terminology, and then all stopping, turning in their seat, looking at you, waiting for your choice, your decision, your call. And you may feel really uncomfortable doing that. You may feel pressured to make a decision. You may feel like you're not prepared or ready or confident in making a decision. This entire process becomes really uncomfortable. Or worse, you might find yourself being put in the background while somebody else dictates what you should do, or how you should do it, or what you should want. Having somebody mansplain over the top of you during an estate meeting has to be one of the grosser experiences I think people can have while they're administering their late partner's estate. Now, sometimes these people that talk over you, interrupt you, background you, sometimes they have the best intentions, but sometimes they don't. So either way, their habit of pushing you out of the driver's seat can have a really big impact on your present and your future. So the alternative that I'm hoping this series will help at least one person move towards is for you to make as many of the decisions as you're comfortable making, which means having a voice and means having an opinion across a series of considerations and topics and ideas that you might not currently be familiar with or even confident in. Which means, really, the step now is to how do we get you to the point where you hit that need to feel a bit more confident and you can feel safe to ask questions that you might think are silly. A very quick side note here. We've recorded about a dozen episodes now, and I've asked a similar question to everybody saying, oh, look, what are some silly questions that people you wish more people would ask? Or what's a silly, how should people know? Every one of them has said there are no silly questions. And then they've gone on to explain why. Because if you have a question in your mind, to all of the people that we've talked to, and I'm confident in saying they're all good advisors, if you have a question in your mind, that means it's not silly. Its own existence means that it's not silly. Anyway, so all of these conditions are often occurring subconsciously in a time of great stress, uncertainty, and emotional weight. They're sitting in the background. They're chewing up memory. They're chewing up cognitive space without you being actively aware of it. So what happens generally is people tend to make some decisions. They delegate others, and then they avoid some, and you'll just rail and complain against others. And you will kind of trip and stumble and be pushed and pulled and lean back and lean forward through this whole process of making all of these decisions. And you'll come out of the other side sort of hair wild, tired, stressed, looking around thinking, oh God, that was awful, like you've been through a gauntlet. But then in 5 years or 10 or 20, you'll look back on that same time with regret or irritation or, even anger. And that anger or that regret or that irritation will be at yourself, which is never a nice feeling. It'll be at the backgrounders, the people that talked over you, that pushed you out of the driver's seat. It'll be at the bullies who wouldn't listen, who would force you to do things that you didn't agree with. Or, sometimes through that process, you can come to have a little bit of irritation or even anger at your late partner. Now, none of this is unusual. None of it is unnatural. It seems to be a lot more common than many of us are aware or that any of us talk about. But this feeling, this idea of getting through this gauntlet of decisions and hassle and stress, and then getting back to a version of life that feels a bit normal, but then looking back 5, 10 years from now with irritation, with regret, with anger, that's not uncommon. But it is something that I hope, with more humility than it might seem as I record into my nearly 20 minutes of monologue, with more humility than that seems, I hope that this series can keep that from happening for you. By providing you with all of this information across these 30-odd episodes in a digestible way that you can freely re-listen to, we won't be taking this down unless, something drastic happens. And by bringing in some really wonderful people to help, my hope is to equip you with the information that you need to feel better about the many, many decisions you have ahead of you. Now, not every episode is going to be applicable. Not every episode is going to be, kind of in your wheelhouse, or that it's not going to be your favorite. That's fine. I'm hoping that the range of things we're talking about is broad enough that you will find some nuggets of wisdom along the way. Now, part of this process is the gauntlet of decision making. A lot of getting through that relatively smoothly or relatively comfortably is this idea that you need to categorize your decisions. And when it comes to that, I like to use what I call the traffic light method. Now, I first came across this idea after reading Robert Pagliarini's book, Sudden Wealth, 12 Steps to Transform Sudden Wealth to Lasting Wealth. Now, he's a financial advisor from America. I believe he has a psychological background. So he's got education and experience in psychology. So his perspectives are really different and really useful. I genuinely encourage you to check out his book. I will pop the link in the show notes. It's available on Amazon. It's really good for people who are now suddenly being asked to manage significant amounts of money. But in this book, Robert introduces the idea of sort of allocating all of your decisions into one of three categories. Red light decisions are the ones that you don't need to make now, probably shouldn't make now until you've had time to calm, find a calm space, settle in, let the dust settle. So you sit on them for a while to avoid making a mistake. Amber light choices are those that you can make now. They're not urgent, so there's nothing to be lost from waiting. If you get it wrong, it's not disastrous, but it's going to be a hassle. Green light decisions are the ones that you can readily make now with very minor risks and consequences. It's a really, really useful structure. He lays it out really nicely in his book. It's a great structure, but just, I guess because I'm a know-it-all, not know-it-all. dogmatic. I've gone and inverted it into this podcast series, and kind of in the model that I have as we're helping people, I've flipped it on its head. You'll notice the different episode tiles through the publication of this series have red, amber, and green accents up the top. There's a few that are blue, that's just me talking. But this style has been very deliberate, and it's in line with how I've approached the series. Because as I've said, I've inverted Robert's approach to categorize the many, many decisions you're facing differently. In my model, I see red light decisions as those critical ones that you have to make now. You can't proceed, you can't go any further until you've made these decisions. Once you've made them, then you can move on. You have to stop and deal with them before you can move through the intersection. The amber light decisions are similar to Robert's version, and they're ones you can start making once you've laid the foundation with the red light options. But these are the ones that are going to get you moving. I mean, I guess to stretch the metaphor, you could race through intersections with them, but we don't want that. We want you to be slowing down, being considerate of what your options are, moving carefully, coming to a stop if need be, but being ready to keep moving forward. These ones are important, but they're not urgent, and they have to naturally wait until the red ones are wrapped up. Meanwhile, the green light decisions are those that you tackle as you start moving out of the initial stages of your grief. Those first tentative steps you take into the next phase of your life. So in this series, the red light episodes, saying that aloud for the first time is making me realize I need to phrase that a bit differently, so I might work on that. But, we'll ignore the questionable implications of calling something the red light episodes. But in this model, they are the first bracket of episodes. In these ones, I talk with estate planning specialists about the importance of different documents at play when it comes to resolving an estate. I talk to others that work every day with people administering estates, so they're intimately familiar with the noise, the worries, and often the mess that you might now be dealing with. And you ultimately need to deal with these before you can move on to the next step. So I chat with solicitors around what all the terms that are being thrown at you actually mean. Probate, executorship, beneficiaries, testamentary trusts, all of these things. So I talk about tax, super, insurance, and disputes, all to help equip you with the knowledge that will leave you feeling, hopefully, even slightly more in control. The amber light portion of the series are also very important, but I think they're a little bit more positive. I envision them as being a little bit more of a positive step forward, because now we're talking about laying the foundation for your new future. Hopefully the immediate impact of the loss is behind you, the paperwork has been settled, the estate finalised, the kids are okay, all the critical elements have been addressed, all the fires have been put out. Now, as comfortable as I know it feels, it's time to now slowly start working on you and your future and what that path is going to look like. So I've brought in psychologists to help us identify the lingering effects of grief over other aspects of life. I talk with another independent financial planner who specialises in helping people rebuild their financial confidence, and her approach of working slowly and methodically and one carefully considered step at a time aligns so closely with the way we work. I also chat about how you can start constructing your own advisory board, because frankly, it's very possible that the advisors you've inherited are simply not a good fit for what you need. They might not gel with the way you want to work, and also there is the possibility they just may not be very good. Hopefully that doesn't offend too many people in the professions. All of these decisions will still be a heavy burden on your cognitive capacity, so they can be easy to avoid or delegate or delay. So my aim with this portion of the series is to help you identify the amber decisions when you land on one, and then have the knowledge and structure to feel better about your choices. Finally, the green light episodes have been perhaps the most difficult ones to approach, which I found a little bit surprising. It sounds counterintuitive. These are the good news episodes, the relaunch ones, as you step into your new future, hair thrown back and a smile on your face. Except it's not really quite true, is it? There's the guilt that comes with moving on to that next phase of life. There's a complexity of emotions around stepping forward, feeling like you're leaving them behind, or even that they may not have been approving of your choices you're making. So it's really important to me that the people I speak with, career coaches, travel agents, home buyers, decluttering experts, and stylists, approach the topic and decisions that we're talking about with sensitivity and awareness, which, between you and I think we've managed to land. So that's my inverted traffic light model. My hope is that it helps you to categorize the fire hose of decisions you're facing into at the moment. Quick note on the fire hose, I think I've pitched that. I've just recorded a session with a mindset coach who does a really great job in explaining some of the issues and challenges that people have as they're coming through this phase of life. And she describes part of it as our capacity to manage and live our life is often defined like a fire hose. It's just all of this stuff coming at us. Inputs, 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 inputs. She said, everybody has a bucket of a finite size. So one of the big tasks that people have is to work out where they're going to put their bucket. Which part of the fire hose will fill their bucket the best? So my hope is that with our work, we're really talking about 3 buckets. Where should the bucket go for the red light decisions? Where should it go for the amber light decisions? And where should it go for the green ones? So my hope is that it helps you categorize that fire hose of decisions into the 3 groups. Red light, I have to do these now before I can move on. Amber light, these are important. They can wait, but they will be part of the foundation I will build my new life on. And green light, these aren't urgent, and I can wait till I'm ready to address them. As I've mentioned in the introduction to the series, I'm taking a bit of a chance with this. It seems like a bit of a crazy idea. I've had a few people tell me that it's a bit out there. I really hope it does prove valuable. I want it to be as useful as possible to the people listening. So I do encourage you again, to help me make sure that it helps even just one person. Please get in touch. Let me know any suggestions, tips, ideas, mistakes, complaints, queries. Send them through. My contact details in the show notes. You can email me at Jordan, Jordan, @planningsolo.com.au. Planning Solo has a Facebook page, an Instagram page. I think we're on Pinterest. We're not on Twitter. We are on LinkedIn. So my personal account on LinkedIn, very easy to find, Jordan Vaka, Vaka. Please reach out. I'd love to hear what you think and what you're making of this series and anything you'd like to see coming up in future episodes. Now, my name's Jordan Vaka, so thank you again for joining me for this episode of Life, Loss and Legacy, a Planning Solo podcast. Until next time, take care, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. Thank you.